Imagine yourself walking on the surface of the moon, doing all the most important work around you and surely having some fun, walking around, jumping around, and driving around too, not to forget falling around. And then going back to the lunar module to fire the Ascent engine, which will get you off the moon surface and put you in orbit, where the command module will take you back to home sweet home, Earth. And at that time, the most important countdown of your life begins. The countdown which will turn on the Ascent engine of the lamp. And if it works, you live, else you die. Most people think that Neil Armstrong setting a foot on moon was an historical and important moment. But actually, when they lifted off from the moon was actually the most important moment. When President Nixon had a note ready, if in case the astronaut cannot come back. So how would you design an engine which has to fire with absolute reliability? I mean, every engine was ultra critical and had to fire for the right time with the right thrust. It was imperative that all the engines work perfectly. But if other engines would fail, there would always be a contingency, backup or a fallback plan in place. However, with the Ascent engine, if it fails to fire, there will be no contingency plan. The mission will be doomed and the astronauts will be stranded. The question is, how would you design an engine which has to fire every time it is operated? You cannot use motors, pump or igniters, as they are complex piece of equipment which needs many things to work perfectly for them to work. So if anything of that stops, that will lead to the failure of the whole equipment. Whatever you design, it has to be in its simplest form possible, as it has to be fail-proof. Moreover, the surface of the moon is very hot. The temperature is 127 degrees at day and 173 degrees negative at night. Thus, it was important that the design be as simple as it can to avoid any failures due to moon dust or the temperature and pressure difference on. The engine needed to work with absolute reliability. Even astronauts on moon would not be able to fix anything if something is broken, as in case of today's International Space Station missions. Because in order to get the weight of the Ascent stage as low as possible, before liftoff the crew tossed their PLSS, Portable Life Support System backpacks, through the open hatch and onto the lunar surface. Without these backpacks, they had nowhere to perform any further EVAs. It wouldn't really matter because the Ascent engine was inaccessible while the LM was on the moon. So there wasn't much they could have done anyway. So scientists came up with simple but effective formula of hypergolic propellants. They used a rocket fuel and an oxidizer which would ignite instantly as soon as they came in contact with each other. The propellant valves enabled the two propellants to mix in engine combustion chamber. The propellants were forced in engine with pressurized helium and would ignite instantly. The fuel was so corrosive that at the end of the test, each engine had to be rebuilt. It meant final assembly of the engine could never be tested. The first time they will fire would be fired on moon. The sheer thought of sending an untested engine to the surface of the moon gave the NASA engineers sleepless nights. And that also in one of the main engine which doesn't have any fallback plan. As if this was not enough, when the Eagle module was just going to take off from moon, Buzz Aldrin accidentally damaged the circuit breaker that would arm the main engine for liftoff from the moon. There was a concern this would prevent firing the engine, stranding them on the moon. A felt tip pen was sufficient to activate the switch. Had this not worked, the lamp circuitry could have been reconfigured to allow firing the Ascent engine. So a tip of pen was used to activate switch, and then this happened.
2, 1, ignition. Right away, Houston.
As it turned out, all the engines fired and worked flawlessly, every time with no problem, and was responsible to get 12 astronauts back home from the moon.